All right, welcome to Against All Odds. We're here on a Wednesday, not any Wednesday, March Madness Eve. And who better to usher in the greatest tournament on earth? Let's bring him in. The committee thought long and hard and gave him the #1 overall seed of college basketball analysts. I think they did the right thing. It's a good call. From ESPN, Jay Bilas. Thanks for jumping on Against All Odds, Jay.
Oh, thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
Jay, the field of 64 hasn't even tipped off yet. And are you already exhausted? I mean, I looked and I read your ESPN column. You broke down, in addition to Selection Sunday and all the questions you have to ask and answer and all the dumb interviews like this you have to do, you broke down all 32 first-round games thoroughly in your ESPN column. You penned 4 paragraphs on Gonzaga, Georgia State, for crying out loud. How tired are you already?
I am energized.
Nice.
A lot of Red Bull and other substances that I don't get tested for. So I'm actually in good shape. I feel great.
Nice. And so the brackets come out Sunday night. How long does it take you for you to fill out yours? Because I need like 13 hours. Yeah.
We actually have to do it while we're on the air. So right. we do that bracketology show and we get handed the bracket and they need it back to put our graphics together on what our picks are. So we do it in about 2 or 3 minutes. So you're not really taking a deep dive into where's this game being played, what time is it, all this stuff. Is it Thursday or Friday? It's basically based upon what you know about each team and the study you've done, and then it's instinctive. But I'll go back and redo it and rethink it. And oftentimes, the more I think about it, the less accurate my picks are. So maybe having my dog make the pick or letting my secretary do it or having my wife, who doesn't really follow the game, do it is actually a better way to win my bracket pool.
It does seem that way, doesn't it? Though, I was wondering, do you go back on a Sunday night? I'm like, oh, I wish I had a do-over there. I would have had Arkansas going further or something like that. Is there one that stands out in the past where you're like, why do they have to put us on the spot and make us pick right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. The mistakes I made were when I went with an upset pick that, you were trying to give people something that you thought, hey, this could happen. Take a look at this. And you wind up picking it. But what I try to do with first round upsets, and I have a number of them in my bracket this year, is when you're going to pick an upset, make sure that you're picking an upset where you're confident either team that wins that first round game is going to lose their next one. Because a lot of times in the past, years ago, I blew up my own bracket. It wasn't some team doing it to me. Like last year, Illinois blew up my bracket by losing to Loyola Chicago.
Sure. Yeah.
But I've blown my own up a couple times by, going with a trendy upset pick because that's what people seem to want. So I'd rather be right at the end than make people happy on Selection Sunday.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get to it. I mean, you have in your Final Four, you have either 1s or 2 seeds, and you can't really get on your case, right? Because I think there's probably been the last 12 years have yielded a double-digit, seed in the second round, but the cream rises to the crop typically, right?
Usually. So in 2008, I picked all 4 #1 seeds to get to the Final Four, and on Selection Sunday, I took a lot of heat over it, saying that way to go out on a limb. And how good is it to go out on a limb if you're not right? Well, all 4 #1 seeds made it that year, but that happens to be the only time that's happened since the tournament expanded in '85. Some of these #1 seeds are going to lose in the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8, or they may lose in the second round to an 8-9. It's possible. But the question is which ones, and you don't necessarily know which ones. So if you're just looking to get a number, the goal is to have as many Sweet 16 teams alive when you get there. My goal is to get 14 out of 16, and as many Elite 8 teams and as many Final Four teams. So if you go with all #1s, you're probably going to have more Final Four teams than others, rather than if you're trying to pick the one that's going to pick them off. That gets a little dicey sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Now I want to talk more tournament in a second, but first I'd like to discuss Coach K's final regular season game. You were there, Cameron Indoor Stadium, a few weeks ago. I believe 96 of his former players were there. Yeah. Talk to us about that, how surreal that was. Did it live up to your expectations, aside from the loss, of course?
Well, yeah, I don't care who wins these games anymore. I got over that a long time ago. But it was surprisingly emotional that, intellectually, that Coach K is 75 years old, and we all knew this was his last year when he announced it. But when you got to the last game, that this was the last time he was going to coach in Cameron Indoor Stadium, there were a lot of emotions that came from it. And honestly, I wasn't sure how I was going to handle it. I thought I did fine. So I was kind of proud of that. But, the night before when we were on SportsCenter or one of the platforms we were on, I had said, I met Coach K when I was 17. And I honestly, I believe this. I don't know where I'd be had he not been in my life. Like, I don't think I would have gone to law school. He made that possible and greased the skids for that to happen. He hired me as an assistant coach. I worked for him as a grad assistant for 3 years. And he really helped me get into broadcasting. He knew I had an interest in it out of high school and introduced me to a Duke alum that was a big shot at ABC Sports. And I worked for ABC Sports during the summers while I was in college and really learned the business. And I hope I wouldn't be homeless and, selling pencils on the street if I didn't have them in my life. But I don't think, I know my life would be substantially different.
Well, hold on. Are you saying that Coach K did something and it got you into law school? Is this a Lori Loughlin situation? We're going to have to find out. Someone's going to have to do jail time for this, right?
Yeah, it's probably worse than that. But yeah, I was playing professional basketball and he had called me and offered me a position on his staff. He knew I had applied to law school, but I was going to apply and defer. And truthfully, I just didn't think I was going to get into Duke. And he said, if you take this job, I think you'll get in. And maybe he knew that. Maybe it was a thing where the school didn't want me. I never got the details from him, but I know that he was influential in my making that decision. And it was one of the best decisions I've made.
Nice. Well, one of my big regrets is actually going to law school. Unlike you, it wasn't a formidable law school, and I didn't use it to my advantage. Although you're in sports media too, at a much higher level. But another regret: not ever going to Cameron Indoor and watching Duke under Coach K. Tell me what I missed out on. At least tell me, did I miss out on like a lot of swearing on the sidelines? But just the atmosphere in general. I'm bummed I never knocked this off my bucket list.
On the swearing thing, the answer is yes. You missed a lot of swearing.
Okay.
And in the 80s, most of the swearing was directed at me.
Oh.
But I think you missed sort of going to Fenway and being at the 75, game 6 when Carlton Fisk hit it out, or being at Wrigley Field and sitting in the bleachers. It's that kind of bucket list deal. Or playing Augusta or Pine Valley or something where you're kind of pinching yourself the whole time. And, I spent, thousands of hours in that place as a player, an assistant coach, as a broadcaster. And there's never been a time that I've been in there where I wasn't saying, don't take this for granted because it's not like this everywhere. There's just something about it. I think the building has a soul. And I feel that way about Allen Fieldhouse at Kansas. I feel that way about Cameron. It's just, Mike Jaminski, who's a good friend, played at Duke before I did and was an All-American there, said he calls it the second holiest building on campus next to the Duke Chapel. And I think he's probably right there.
Now, you've said before, fans always point to Leitner and Grant Hill and Bobby Hurley, those championship teams, and they say they put the program on the map. But I've heard you say Johnny Dawkins is the most important player to the Duke program.
Without Johnny Dawkins, Coach K is not Coach K. I don't know if Coach K would agree with that. He might have been uber successful anyway, but I don't see it happening. Johnny Dawkins is the most important player to ever play at Duke. And certainly without argument, most important player under Coach K, because it doesn't get going. Like the first time I played an NCAA tournament game was the first time Coach K coached in one. We had the same amount of experience going into that game. And so we were on his first ACC championship team, his first Final Four team, his first NCAA championship game, all that stuff. But none of that happens without Johnny Dawkins. We would have been good without him, but we wouldn't have been great. And we were great with him because he was great. But the Leitner, Hill, Hurley teams, I was an assistant on those teams, and they put that thing through the roof. So Johnny used to say, hey, we built this foundation, but they put the roof on it.
Interesting. And you think Coach K would agree with you that it's Johnny? I would appreciate if you ask Coach K and then get back to me on his answer as well. What do you think he would say?
Honestly, I think he would agree with that. you know how this is. Like, you're good at what you do or something, or, I was a really good player coming out of high school and I thought I was as good as anybody. And then you see somebody like Johnny Dawkins or Michael Jordan or Len Bias, and you're going, okay, whoever said all men are created equal was lying. That's not true. Johnny was on a different level, and Mark Allery was a great player and All-American, but Johnny was just on a different level.
How do you think Coach K would have done in the NBA? I mean, it's not a foregone conclusion that there's success rate. Obviously, these guys, even with the players, you go from being used to losing 1 or 2 games a year. Typically, you're taken by one of the worst teams, the bottom 7 or 8 teams, and you're going to lose like 50 or, God forbid, 60 games a year. Do you think Coach K would have been able to deal with that, or did he make the right move staying put?
Well, he certainly made the right move by staying put, but he would have done extraordinarily well on any level. Now, if he had coached in the NBA and that had been his main gig, certainly he would have had like Greg Popovich or something, had down years. But he's Coach K is the real deal. Like, he's not only a great coach and a great leader, he's a great guy. And I actually think being a great guy is a big part of his being such a great coach, because we always knew he believed in us and he would fight for us. And he is so great off the court. Like, one of the things people don't realize about Coach K, he's ridiculously funny. So he's a great guy to be around. And I was talking with a former teammate of mine, and we were saying, God, the off-season Coach K is always so much more fun to be around than the in-season Coach K. And now we're going to get the off-season Coach K all the time. So there are some things to look forward to, but I'm going to miss him competing. It'll be different.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting up in age, and obviously the travel and everything else has to factor in. But what do you think the NIL deals and the change? Because I know a lot of coaches like to have control over the players, and you can have a little less control if your starting point guard is pulling in $1.5 million from 5-hour energy drink or something, right? Do you think that factors in at all with someone like Coach K?
I don't. I think if all these guys that are saying that, most of them are in their 60s or 70s, whatever, that are the biggest complainers about the way things are now. But they hark back to the old days. But none of them seem to hark back to the old days when they were only making $75,000 a year. The game is it's a pro game now, and it's sold like the NBA. It's played. Everything's like the NBA. And it's almost laughable to think that the players wouldn't get a piece, at least a small piece of the pie. They're only getting a small piece right now. They're going to get more. That's going to happen. They're going to get more, because you can't run a multi-billion-dollar business like this and expect the revenue generators to say, "Oh yeah, we're fine with just this little sliver." It's not going to happen.
Yeah. All right. Now back to the tournament real quick. So we've talked about on this podcast. I'm curious to hear your thoughts when you consider teams going forward and how much they're going to advance in the tournament. Which 3 factors, maybe rank these 3 factors: coaching, guard play, experience?
All of them are key. But the players are the most important thing. So it's great when the coach has experience of knowing how to handle certain things, but a lot of it's off the court: ticket requests, travel, all the things you have to navigate in the NCAA tournament that could trip you up a little bit. But really, it's mostly about players. So your thing about experience is important. It's not dispositive, but it's important, because we've had a couple freshman dominated teams win in the last 10 years. Duke won in 2015 when they were all freshmen of their lead guys, and Kentucky won in 2012 when their lead guys were freshmen. But you'd rather have experienced talent rather than super talent, I think, most of the time. And then guard play is important until you need to grab a rebound or block a shot. I've never seen a team win it that didn't have good balance front court and back court. And that's true of mid-majors too, that the mid-majors that break through, all of them can score and guard in the post. And so if you have just a guard dominated team and you don't have big guys, they can pull an upset, maybe 2, but they're not going to get to a Final Four unless they've got balance across the board.
Give me a player you've watched all season you think they could improve their draft stock the most in this tournament. I mean, I love Keegan Murray. I love watching him play, but I think he's slated to go like 6th or 7th anyway. Is there any mid-range player that you think could jump a couple levels?
Yeah, well, there are a bunch of guys that can jump a few levels. I mean, I think the guys at UConn, like Adama Sanogo, could jump up there, and people could see what he's really all about. There's a player at Colorado State named David Roddy, who I think is going to play in the NBA. He's this undersized big guy at 6'6", but he's really skilled. EJ Liddell at Ohio State. They've got a tough matchup in that first round playing Loyola Chicago. Ohio State got knocked out last year early by Oral Roberts and Max Asmus and Kevin O'Banner, Kevin O'Banner's now at Texas Tech. Mm-hmm. But EJ Liddell is he could jump up there as well. There's so many, and then Ben Mathurin at Arizona. Mathurin's more of a jump shooter, really athletic, but I think, playing at Arizona, people are going to see him even more. The scouts know about him, but people are going to see him even more.
Yeah. All right. Now, I know you don't care too much about gambling, and shame on you for that, but I should point out, in the last two tournaments combined, there's in the first round, there's been a total of 10 games that are 3-point spread or less. This year, 13 in the first round. People are saying it's because the transfer portal makes it easier for good players to go back and forth. First of all, what do you think about that? And is that going to continue as we see it? I mean, they're going to be, we're looking at like Murray State against San Francisco in the first round. Like, you look at that matchup, you'd be like, oh my God, that looks like a third round matchup where things went completely sideways for the lower seeds, right?
Yes. So Murray State, actually, to your last question, has some really good players. Tevin Brown played with Ja Morant in the same backcourt. He's really talented and really good. KJ Williams had 39 in the game earlier this year. But the transfer portal question, yes. I mean, the transfer portal makes it easier to be good right away. I don't know that you can use it necessarily to be great. But gone are the days where a coach gets a job and he gets a 3-year grace period to build the program up. You have to be able to build it right away through the transfer portal. So we're seeing recruiting change, and it's people like to say free agency. It's not free agency in the NBA, but you can build a lot faster. And then part of it's the COVID year. A lot of teams are older this year, so the number of teams that have a bunch of 6th-year seniors and older guys, I thought that would have led to a little bit more consistency by teams, and it doesn't seem to have done that. But we've got some powerful teams at the top, but we don't have the superpower that we had last year with Baylor and Gonzaga, where you knew they were going to be in the Final Four, and you knew they were going to those two teams were going to be the champions. This year, it's a little more balanced at the top, where you've got a number of contenders, but I still think there's only 6 teams that are in the pool to win it. There are a number of teams that get to a Final Four, because if somebody loses in your bracket, opens up a path for you, there are a bunch of teams that can win 4 games. There are a finite number that can win 6 and win the whole thing. That's a different ball game.
Interesting. So you said 6 teams. So we know your Final Four is Kansas, Arizona, Gonzaga, and Kentucky. So who's the +2? I think
UCLA and Purdue I would put up there. I had Duke in there. I had it at 8 before. I thought Duke was there, but they're not playing as well right now. It doesn't mean they can't put it together, because they've got all the pieces. Duke has the most talent. They're so young. Kentucky should be in there as well, because I think Kentucky can win the whole thing. But it's not, when you start talking about winning it, you're really talking about 1s and 2s and the occasional 3 in a given year. Right. You have to go back a long way where you had a higher seed win it. And it's usually because the committee screwed up the seeding. Like, I think the last time was probably 2014 when UConn played Kentucky. And Kentucky was an 8 seed that year and made it to the championship game. And you're going, what, are you kidding me? They were a 3 seed, and the committee just screwed the seeding up.
Right.
So you can have one of those. I just don't know that it'll be this year.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think you're right. Like a Houston or a Texas Tech, you could see in the Final Four, right? I mean, we have seen that in the recent past, but it is mostly 1s and 2 seeds. And yet the overall 1 seed this year, being Gonzaga, hasn't won in 8 years, hasn't won the whole thing in 8 years. So it's so bizarre. It's what makes it the greatest, right? It really is the best. And it's as good an indicator as any as to who the best team is. I argue with friends about this, but you go sport to sport, you're mostly going to get a 1 or a 2 seed, a top 4 or 5 team in all the land winning it.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to look at the NFL that I don't know when this happened, when they expected a guy in my position to be able to pick these games and tell you who's going to win. I can tell you how the game's going to be played and what to look for and all that. What are the keys? But if I knew who's going to win, I'd be in Vegas right now, and I'd quit my job and just do that. But I look at the NFL and all the NFL analysts, the guys that are sitting in a similar chair to mine, they're all wrong on who's going to win those games. Nobody knows who's going to win in competition, and we've never known. But there's so much interest in this now that people want to know. So you try to point to here's an upset that could happen. So look at this, and point to that kind of thing. But there are sometimes like where the lower seeded team is just better, and look, I think Virginia Tech is better than Texas. So I'm picking Virginia Tech in that game. I think they're better, and that's why I think they're going to win. They're the better team. That doesn't mean Texas can't win, but if Texas wins, I think it'll be an upset, and I think actually Virginia Tech will be favored in that game.
Well, the good news is there's zero accountability in this business, so you could scream your head off about Virginia Tech if you want, winning cutting down the nets, and if it doesn't happen, I guarantee they'll have you on next week.
I love zero accountability. I love low standards and zero accountability. It
works out. Speaking of cutting down the nets, should excitable 19-year-olds with pituitary issues be entrusted with scissors on a ladder, or is it time to move on to a different tradition?
Well, if it weren't sponsored, even the ladder now is sponsored. It's like Warner Ladders or something. So everything's sponsored. There's money changing hands on everything. I think the greatest thing, if Gonzaga wins, so not only will it validate their program and all their Final Fours and championship games, but Mark Few will get to climb that ladder and then reach as high as he can to get to the bottom of the net. That'll be fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. And now we'll learn that Mark Few is afraid of heights and can't do it. I mean, he's been hoping to lose all along. Wouldn't that be something if we saw that?
Well, Mark's a good friend. I tease him all the time about being short. So he may need a ladder on top of that ladder to get up to the net.
Nice. Real quick, your favorite double-digit seed?
My favorite I mentioned Virginia Tech. They're a really good double-digit seed. I like Loyola to win their first game because they've got older players. They've been there before, and they can slow the tempo down. They're playing Ohio State, and then I like Michigan to beat Colorado State. Another one to look at, because I don't think either team's going to win the next game. Vermont is very good, but they play in the America East. And so they're playing Arkansas. Arkansas is better than they are, but because Vermont shoots it so well, they're all seniors. They play a lot of 5-out motion that's tough to guard. I think Vermont can win that game.
Right. All right. That'll be fun. You mentioned Loyola Chicago. Should they just make Sister Jean an assistant coach at this point? Or maybe she takes over for Duke. Wouldn't that be something?
I think it's an NCAA violation because Sister Jean has access to higher power.
That's true.
They test for banned substances and all that stuff, but they don't test for getting the big man upstairs involved in the outcome.
Yeah.
So the NCAA has never been able to enforce that, and it's going to be a problem.
It doesn't seem fair. You're right. You don't follow anyone on Twitter. I think it's a good move. You're able to keep your sanity that way. But if you were to follow one person, who would you go with?
Probably J-Lo or Beyonce.
Yeah.
But I only do that because I've maintained it, but I only do that because when I first got on Twitter, I didn't know how it worked. And so, my wife was the one that told me to do it. And so I got on there and I was looking at mentions or something, and somebody started calling me out where do you think you're too good to follow anybody? And I responded saying yes, and just made a big joke out of it. So that joke has continued till now.
It's good. It's solid. It's kind of like having a winning streak for many, many years with 2 million followers, but following nobody. All right, last question. Will you cry at one shining moment when they show Coach K?
I don't know. I might. It depends on how his season ends. I'm always happy for whomever wins, and I really don't care who wins. But whenever his last game is, when he goes into his post-game press conference, I think it's going to be an emotional, experience for him, certainly. And then I think for those of us that know him so well, watching it, The finality of it still hasn't hit me. Like when they lost in the ACC tournament, I knew there was more coming. So I'll be interested to see what he says, how he handles it. And I'll be interested to see how, like, I cry a lot at movies and stuff like that. I've never cried at a press conference. So, that'll be a test of my emotional state probably.
All right. I am going to take that as a yes. I think they're going to be hearing your wailing all the way from Rolling Hills Estates, your old stomping grounds. But it won't make me think any less of you as a man. I got to be honest.
You probably couldn't think any less of me. It's not possible.
No, that's not true. You're the best. Jay Bilas, thanks for coming on. ESPN, check him out. He has a very, very busy 2.5 weeks coming up. I appreciate it, pal.
Thanks for having me. Great to be with you.
All right.